So we talked last Sunday about really the Western concept of addiction, which is quite interesting, and then we talked about the Buddha's teaching of craving, and which is really very similar, I think. So I kind of I got very interested in a way, in sort of like the way we were talking last week about maybe the Buddhist 8-step program as opposed to the Western 12-step program, you know. And so I had breakfast with one of you this week, and we were talking about their meditation practice, and I told this person, you know, they weren't here last Sunday, and I was telling them about the Dharma talk, and I said, you know, I said I began at this age, at my age, 55. I got an email from my nephew last night. He's a lawyer, and he said, I can't believe, he was talking about his body falling apart at 55. I thought, please. So he said, you know, he said, my body, he had surgery for a rotator cuff. But anyway, he said, my body, he said, I feel like I'm 29 inside, but he said, this body is 55. And I wrote him back, and I said, you can't be 55. I said, I'm just 59. I said, how is that possible? So I said to this person at breakfast, as I think about the Dharma and our practice and what we're doing here, it occurs to me that really there's only one question that is really, maybe one crucial question that almost no one asks themselves. I mean, Ian probably asked himself. One question that I think most of us kind of avoid asking. I do. And hint, I think I said it last week, but so now I'm not going to tell you what the question is. Can you figure out what it is? So I'm going to read you all. This is like, I talked about Namavira last week. This is the famous book. I didn't bring it, but it's called Clearing the Path. It's an extraordinary book. It's extraordinary. And he's almost too smart for me, and I'm not being humble. I don't have a humble bone in my body. But I'm not kidding. He's just extraordinarily brilliant. And what is this? One of my favorite little paragraphs. I read this in Byrd, and I loved it so much I wrote it down. I copied it, but I'm going to read it to you all. And so I'm going to start. So the Buddha says that we don't do unskillful things because of sin. We don't do this because we were born in sin, right? We don't do bad things because Satan is, making us do bad things, right? So you all know this. It's one of the fundamental teachings of the Buddha, and it's quite almost like a line of, it divides Buddhism from other teachings in a way. He says that we are unskillful, and we suffer because of ignorance, right? Avijja is the word. Avijja, A-V-I-J-J-A, which A means not, so we would assume then that Vijja means knowledge. Right? So if you've got Vijja, it's really good. If you ain't got Vijja, you've got Avijja, which is not good. So the problem is, according to the Buddha, and certainly according to Namavira, it's kind of universal, meaning that probably the odds are everybody in the room has got some of it, a little of Avijja. Does anybody think you ain't got any Avijja? Doug. Wait, I don't have any at all. I have no visual whatsoever. So, but it's a great word. You know, in the Sanskrit it's a vidya, but in Pali it's a vijja. I just did that to impress you all, by the way. All right. So he says, this is a wonderful, wonderful. A man or woman, I'm adding woman, he didn't say that. He was a little sexist, just a little bit. A man or woman with a vijja practicing, I'm going to just translate, he says practicing reflection. I'm going to translate that as mindfulness, because he actually says that reflection is mindfulness, which I agree with. I'll explain that sometime, maybe not today. Reflection would be, in other words, immediate experience would not be the reflection of the experience. Mindfulness would be looking at the experience, right? So rather than just being really, let's say, lost in the content of the experience. But anyway, so he says, so a person practicing, a person with a vijja may identify self with both the mindfulness and with immediate experience, or with either alone. So if I'm being mindful, in other words, and so I'm looking at Taryn over there, and I'm mindful of looking at Taryn, or mindful of looking at Beverly, I might think that there's no ignorance in that, right? But he says a person who does that does not conclude that the let's see. Okay, I'm trying to translate what he's saying as I'm going along. So he says that the reason why we are not aware that there's a vijja in our mindfulness or in our experience is because we have this we're identified with a self. It's always, I think I am doing this. I am seeing Taryn. I am seeing Monique, which is, of course, that's solidifying this what the Buddha said is, or argued would be an illusion or a delusion. There is no person inside seeing. There's just seeing. So someone went to the Buddha and they said, they asked him for a real quick training, and he said, they asked him 3 times, he wouldn't answer, and he finally said, well, in the seeing, there's only the seen. In the hearing, there's only the heard. In touching, there's only the touch. In other words, in the seeing, there's not like I am seeing you. There's seeing. But we're so conditioned, right? We are just conditioned relentlessly to this, I am doing this. I am doing this, whatever it is. So that's a vijja, okay? That's the definition of a vijja, is this conviction that there is this me that's doing, that is experiencing reality. And by the way, the Buddha says, you're guaranteed to suffer. There ain't no way out of it, right? I mean, if you cling to that me, that I'm doing this and I'm seeing this, number one, that me is not going to last forever, but that me is embedded in a body that's growing old and is falling apart. And let me just let you know that at 73, it's true. So as your body starts falling apart, the more you're identified, with this me, you are kind of doomed to suffering. So anyway, he says, I'm having some problem with this because I'm trying. Anyway, I'm just going to read it. He does not conclude that neither, the mindfulness part or the immediate part is self, and the reason is clear. It is not possible. So he said, and this is why I love this. He says it's not possible to get outside of ignorance by reflecting on it. However much you may step back from yourself to observe yourself, you're always taking ignorance with you. I just love that. Did you get that? I mean, there's no matter how much you pull back and you get into intellect or you get into objectivity, right, and you get into analysis, you're still taking it with you. It's going right with you. Because why? Because ignorance is thinking, I think I'm a self. So he says you can't step back from it. You take it with you. And then this next one is just even better. I love it. So he says there is there is as much avijja in the self-observer as there is in what you're observing. And this is the reason why avijja is stable. Simply by reflecting on it, you can never observe it and at the same time recognize that it is ignorance. For in reflection, or again in mindfulness, or in objectivity, okay? He says, avijja is the judge as well as the accused, and the verdict is always not guilty. I love that, right? Do you get it? So in other words, ignorance is the judge, it's the accused, and it always says, so I'm not guilty. So it's a problem. Let's see if there's anything else to read with this. So he says, in order to put an end to this delusion, this ignorance and avijja, which is a matter of recognizing it as avijja, you have to recognize it as avijja. He says it is necessary to accept on trust from the Buddha's teachings, which contradict our experience. Does that make sense? So, to some extent, it's almost like we have to, because the experience is, I'm convinced there's a me, right? So the Buddha says, no, that's wrong, right? This is just a condition, something that you have, you're identified with your body. So you're identified with your feeling, you're identified with your thought. So, so in other words, so Nanavira is saying that to some extent you can't think your way out of ignorance. The Dharma is sort of what you want to think of it is the Dharma is this outside information, right? That's telling you, no, do this practice, and slowly you will come to a profound understanding. So number one, I think I've said this to you all many times. I used to say in Dharma talks, it's like, kind of funny. You get up in the morning, you look in the mirror and say, hello, ignorance. What's happening? We have that's a terrible, it's such a pejorative word for us, right? That word ignorance, it really is. You say, just say hello, ignorance. Just kind of mean, because, and really in Buddhism, it's not like, it has nothing to do with intelligence. You could have an IQ of 95 and be tremendously further down the road than someone with an IQ of 190, right? You understand? Because it has nothing to do with intellect in that sense. It has something to do with your ability to grasp, again, the Dharma, the teaching that the cause of our suffering is our clinging to this delusion. Now, so there is a really element of faith in it. There really is, right? In other words, if you have a certain element of avijja in consciousness, if you do, Lisa, if you do, if I do, and someone says to you, look, you know what? You actually have this in your consciousness. So you look back at me and you say, you're full of crap. I don't have any of that in my consciousness. Really, right? Everybody, basically one says that. So then, there's this element of faith or trust or something that happens. For me, for whatever reason, I just believe he's right. I always have. I've just always read the Dharma and I resonate to it. I just resonate, and something in me says, that's right. And it doesn't matter. In other words, at the same time, I can still recognize, well, wait a minute, I think that I am me. So you can, there's a kind of a paradox and a dissonance that occurs because you may still cling to this notion that I am my body. I am, the teaching of the Buddha is that that we cling to that the avijja is clinging to five. Some of us cling to the body as me. Some of us cling to my thoughts. I'm not my body. I'm my thoughts. Right? What I think is who I am. Some people cling to their feelings, my emotions, what I feel. I'm happy, I'm sad, right? Other people cling to their perception. So there are different, that's called the five khandhas or skandhas. So I just wanted to suggest to you that it is, for me, in terms of like having a little self-esteem or not having a self-esteem, I'm not insulted by your accusation that I've got a little dose of ignorance. You're not going to insult me by saying that, because it's pure dharma. If I have processed through to the extent that I am not coming from this idea of a solid self inside, then maybe then you can say, well, look, you're moving down the road. So the question that I said to my friend at breakfast, I was just saying this about all of us, not just him. I certainly was not accusing him of it. I think that the most profound question that you can ask yourself is, am I suffering? Anybody in the room suffering? See, if you've got a little ignorance, then you're going to say, I'm not suffering. Everybody else is. The world is, right? But I'm not suffering. And so, I've walked through, so we were discussing this, and I remembered, I think I mentioned this on last week, but I remember there's this book written by somebody, The Bare Bones of the Buddhist Teaching. You can purchase it outside for $10. We're doing a sale. I'm just kidding. All right, so I wrote this, and I was trying to remember this, and so I wrote. I wonder where it is. Well, I can't remember it now. Oh. Beyond the fact of our psychological denial. Okay, so, see, I think that we all are invested in saying we're not suffering. I think I am too, okay? I think you are too. I think we're all invested in saying we're not suffering. We look around at the world. Do you see any suffering? Right? Is there any suffering going on right now in Syria, in Iraq? I was thinking, people get on the plane in, the Malaysian plane, and they think they can fly over the Ukraine and be safe. Instead, they get shot down by a missile. So then a guy gets on a plane and brings the Ebola virus to Dallas. You just look at the suffering in this world. It is incomprehensible. I think it is so incomprehensible that we have to build up a barrier between ourselves and it. I'm not suffering, although it's clear that the world's suffering. Okay, so this is what this Byrd wrote here. Beyond the effect of our psychological denial is the thing that makes it so hard for us to truly grasp the simple fact that we really are suffering. What that fact is, it's our capacity to suffer beyond comprehension. The truth is, it's our capacity to suffer that makes it feel like we're not suffering. Reflect for a moment on the suffering of millions of Jews, gypsies, homosexuals in the concentration camps of Germany and Poland. Think of the untold millions of nameless humans who were murdered in the frozen gulags of the Soviet Union or the killing fields of Cambodia. Who can count the numbers of people martyred by the murderous rage of hatred? The human capacity to suffer is a universal trait shared by all sentient beings. Could it be that it is our very ability to tolerate suffering that makes it seem so normal? We have watched the mind-boggling spectacle of this dates when I wrote this book. We have watched the mind-boggling spectacle of New Orleans sinking beneath cascading waters that broke through the frail levees. We remember the shocking images of desperate men and women jumping from windows high above the burning floors of the World Trade Center, victims of people gone mad with religious intolerance. Yet somehow, in the face of incomprehensible suffering, we pick ourselves up and go on. So here is the question, and I posed this question last week. I mean, the question is, are we suffering? But I suggested this last Sunday. Is it possible that suffering did not look normal to the Buddha? Just think about it. Is it possible that maybe the Buddha looked at it and he saw that it wasn't normal for human beings to suffer because he wasn't suffering? Imagine what it would be like to be free of suffering and to witness everyone around you lost in suffering. Perhaps his heart opened in complete compassion, which is why he chose to spend the remainder of his life teaching those who were willing to listen. So what is it? So what about suffering as just this continual itch, or just this continual itch of dissatisfaction, right? It doesn't have to be like, we don't have to be in Syria, right, with those crazy people. God, how many crazy people? I'm thinking of all the different, I mean, it's like we can go out into the world and look at like just incomprehensible suffering, and then, and if I counted the number of clients who I saw when I was really working, who said, well, when I compare my life to others, it's not that bad. I heard that over and over and over. And I said, well, really? Okay. So I said, well, and I said, yeah, my childhood, it really wasn't that bad. It was okay. I said, really? And yeah, I said, my parents. But so we compare ourselves, and we say, and obviously if you compare your life to like what's going on in Africa, I mean in Liberia, oh my God, right? So if you compare yourself to that, yeah, I'm not suffering. But what about dissatisfaction with this moment? What about this, again, what is it, Nizar Gadada said, right, the consciousness is an itch that makes us scratch. So what is that itch that makes us scratch? So again, the Buddha said that it is clinging, that we cling because of that inability to really embrace the truth of what we are, which is what I love. The Tibetans call us. You know what they say? They say we're intelligent space. I love that. They describe what you are as intelligent space. It's kind of hard to kind of cling on to that, isn't it? Right? There's no shape or form to that, but in other words, the truth is what we are is probably is wonderful and huge. And what we've done is we've constricted ourselves down into these little entities. So I think that I'm just going to suggest to you that it's a great question to go through, like tomorrow when you're going through, like when you're standing at the library, right back where you're whatever you're doing tomorrow, whatever you're doing tonight, when you go home and walk for this, just ask the question. Well, am I suffering? I mean, be honest with yourself. And we're not talking about, you're not, gnashing the teeth, right? Gnashing your teeth. Oh, Lord. We're not talking about that because we have been blessed karmically, those of us, right? We've been blessed. We're living in a totally different environment. But if there's this assertion, oh no, I'm not suffering, Marta, right? I'm not suffering at all. So then look at that. What's that coming from? Because the Buddha said you can't change until you acknowledge the truth of suffering. That's his bottom line sentence. There's no hope of change until you can acknowledge the truth of suffering. And the truth of suffering is not that they are suffering, right? The truth of suffering for me is not that you are suffering, right? I mean, in other words, it has to be this. That's the only, that's the only way that one can get on. So that's why I said, like, right, we say in the 12-step program, right, I acknowledge that I'm powerless before, right? But the Buddhist program begins with, I acknowledge that I am suffering. And that strikes at the ego, which absolutely is going to say, no, I'm not suffering. Look at all those other people. It has no interest in that, because it's striking right at a core delusion. I don't think I can do any better than that.